On a rain-soaked afternoon, Officer Dorman arrives at the crime spot. The police have recovered a mutilated body from the scene. There are no external injuries on the body, but every single bone inside is broken. Upstairs, the only surviving girl from the family is too terrified to speak. She is gradually losing consciousness, repeatedly muttering just two words, "dead child" and "dead husband." When Dorman tries to take her to the hospital, she suddenly pulls a gun from his pocket and shoots herself. The scene then shifts, introducing a married couple, Farah and Rafa. Today is their wedding anniversary. Farah surprises Rafa with the news that she is pregnant. Overjoyed, Rafa is thrilled by the news. Rafa works for a large construction company and has recently been given responsibility for a major project. While Rafa's team is happy, his rival, Ronald, is not. This isn't the first time something like this has happened, it has happened multiple times. During a heated argument between the two, Ronald ominously remarks, "I hope you stay alive until the project is finished." Although they often argue due to rivalry, Ronald has never said anything like this before. Rafa's friend, Eddie, diffuses the tension, and the two head to a salon. From their conversation, it is revealed that Eddie will handle office work for a few days because Rafa is moving into a new house with his wife. Eddie congratulates him on his new life and advises him to pray before moving in. Rafa also asks Eddie to find a housemaid for them. A few days later, Rafa and Farah move into their new home, far from the pollution of the city. The house is beautiful. Rafa installs CCTV cameras throughout the property. Both are preparing themselves for the future. During this time, Farah wants to talk to Rafa about something from the past, but he isn't interested. His focus is on building a bright future. That night, while brushing his teeth, Rafa suddenly finds several of his teeth falling out. When he looks in the mirror, he sees that a part of his jaw is torn open. He screams in horror, only to realize that it was just a nightmare. The next morning, at breakfast, Rafa notices Farah eating half-cooked meat. When he questions her about it, Farah says their unborn child suddenly craved such meat. Rafa throws the meat in the trash and asks her to cook a fresh meal before leaving for work. The day goes well, but Ronald is secretly planning how to bring Rafa down. That night, while trying to sleep, Farah feels as though a woman is standing in the room, her hair messy, her face terrifying. The woman slowly reaches toward Farah's belly. Farah wakes up with a start. There's no one there. Was it just her imagination? But it felt too real. Rafa reassures Farah, saying that such feelings are common during pregnancy. He insists she should get some rest and visit the doctor the next day. Rafa was supposed to accompany her, but due to his work commitments, Farah decides to go alone. At the office, Rafa shares his hallucinations with Eddie, expressing concern. Eddie dismisses them as normal and advises Rafa to focus on work. Meanwhile, at the clinic, Farah tells the doctor about her craving for half-cooked meat. The doctor assures her that excessive cravings are common in healthy pregnancies. After checking the fetus, the doctor informs her that they are going to have a baby boy. At the construction site, Rafa excitedly shares the news with Eddie. Eddie tells him to go home immediately and celebrate the moment with his wife, assuring him that he will take care of the remaining work. Rafa feels grateful to have such a friend. That night, on her way back home after the checkup, Farah suddenly experiences labor pains. With no mobile network, she is unable to contact anyone. Stopping the car in the middle of the road, she desperately seeks help. Luckily, a couple passing by stops and helps her. They drive her home and assist in an emergency delivery. It seems as if the baby is forcefully trying to come out. The strangest part? When they bury the umbilical cord in the ground, it appears to move slightly. But they dismiss it, overwhelmed with joy at the birth of their child. They name him Ranga. The next morning, while holding the baby, Farah feels as if he clawed at her hand. For a brief moment, she sees a terrifying hand. However, she doesn't dwell on it. That night, Farah wakes up to the sound of Ranga crying. She gets up and notices that his room door is open. As she enters the room to check on him, in the dim light, she thinks she sees Ranga's eyes turn white. Dismissing it as a trick of the light, she leans in to check again, only to find a horrifying demon standing behind her. Farah feels her breath seize up in terror. She runs to Rafa and tells him everything. But to Rafa, it all seems like a hallucination, possibly caused by reflections from the lights outside. Farah is not convinced. Rafa checks the CCTV footage, but everything appears normal. The next day, they organize Ranga's circumcision ceremony. Eddie brings Wadi to help look after the house. Family and friends are invited to the event. However, when they attempt the circumcision, it cannot be done, no matter how hard they try. As a result, they decide to postpone it for a few days. Amidst all this, Rafa grows increasingly worried about his wife. Her behavior toward their newborn is very unusual. Rafa researches online and learns about a disorder called baby blues, which often affects mothers after childbirth. Meanwhile, Wadi experiences something supernatural while working in the bathroom. She informs Rafa about it, but since Rafa does not believe in such things, she decides not to tell anyone else. Instead, the next day, she calls Wangsho for help. Wadi was the first to ask about the new house and learned that the entire house had been purified except for the bathroom. Since Wadi had experienced a supernatural incident in the bathroom, Wangsho decided to check the place. Later, when he went to see Ranga, he was startled to see Ranga's red eyes. Without wasting a single moment, Wangsho breathlessly warned them to leave the house immediately and rushed out. That night, a terrifying incident happened to Farah. She saw someone else lying in Ranga's place. The figure had a black body and long nails. Hearing Farah's scream, Rafa ran in and somehow managed to calm her down. This further strengthened their suspicion that Farah was suffering from baby blues. That very night, Wadi also had a horrifying experience. While she was in the kitchen, she saw a cloth-wrapped baby lying on the floor, slightly moving. When Wadi tried to remove the cloth, someone suddenly jumped onto her. But in the next moment, Wadi realized there was no one there. Following this incident, Wadi left the house. As time passed, these occurrences led to frequent arguments between the husband and wife. Rafa believed that Farah's fear of her own child was nothing but a psychological disorder. Moreover, Rafa was already under pressure due to the approaching deadline of his new project. He felt it was unfair to make his colleagues work overtime while he kept taking days off. Frustrated, he stormed out to work overtime. As the night deepened, Farah kept hearing the sounds of a baby crying and laughing throughout the house. Outside, the relentless rain poured, and inside, the atmosphere felt suffocating and eerie. When Farah returned to the room, she found that Ranga was missing. While searching for him in a panic, a few nails suddenly came out of her mouth. In the midst of everything, she barely had time to process what was happening. She then saw a terrifying female demon draped in white cloth approaching her from the room. Terrified, Farah ran downstairs, only to see the demon sitting in a corner of the veranda, holding Ranga in her arms. But was the child in her arms really Ranga? As she moved forward with a flashlight in the darkness, Farah suddenly felt as if Ranga was running away from her. But was such a major illusion even possible? With the presence of supernatural activities in the house, Farah also noticed a red light shining from outside onto a corner of the veranda, where Ranga's cradle was moving continuously. Unable to hold herself back any longer, she grabbed a knife and ran straight towards Ranga to kill him. Just as she was about to plunge the knife into Ranga's chest, Rafa intervened and stopped her. For a brief moment, everything seemed normal. But that very night, all of Rafa's misconceptions were shattered. For the first time, he saw the demon with his own eyes and was utterly terrified. Without wasting any more time, they packed up their essentials at dawn and moved to a new house near the construction site. There, they met their new neighbor, Officer Dorman. He had retired after the incidents of that fateful day. During a conversation with Rafa in the evening, Dorman noticed something strange about Ranga and recounted the most horrifying case of his police career, one that he had never been able to explain. Dorman still believed that a girl had died because of his carelessness. Although he had left the police force after that day, he never truly stopped investigating the case. It was impossible for a human to break all the bones in someone's body without any external injuries. The most disturbing part was that they had found a baby's dead body at the crime scene, completely drained of blood. While investigating the case, Dorman learned from some village elders about an occult ritual where a newborn baby is sacrificed to the devil to bring harm to others. This practice had existed for centuries in various villages of Jakarta and Indonesia, although many found it hard to believe. According to the neighbors of the afflicted house, the baby would cry every day during prayer times and the call to prayer. Over time, this also affected the baby's parents, leading to noticeable changes in their personalities. At that moment, they suddenly heard Farah screaming from upstairs. When they rushed there, they found Ranga crying uncontrollably. Just then, a bunch of hair came out of Rafa's mouth. At the same time, he vomited blood, which contained several nails. Witnessing this horrifying scene, Dorman suspected that someone was using black magic against them. He had encountered a similar case before, where a baby was used to take revenge on a specific member of a family. The ritual required either a part of the victim's body or the baby's placenta or a woman. Although Dorman left that night, Rafa couldn't stop thinking about who could have done such a thing. After much contemplation, one name finally came to his mind, his colleague, Ronald. The last time Ronald had spoken to Rafa, he had said, "I hope you stay alive until the project is finished." Maybe Rafa's suspicion was correct. That night, he went straight to Ronald's house. To his surprise, the front door was open. Entering quietly, Rafa was stunned. The entire house was filled with burning candles, and several flowers were placed on plates. There was no longer any doubt, Ronald was responsible for everything. When Rafa confronted him, Ronald completely denied it and said, "Maybe I lost to you in terms of the project. But if I wanted to bring you down, I would take legal action or file false allegations against you. Why would I resort to black magic?" Ronald further reveals that these candles, flowers, and all the decorations are for his wife because today is their anniversary. Hearing this, Rafa is shocked. Observing the surroundings more carefully, he realizes that Ronald wasn't lying. He had indeed made a big mistake. Feeling guilty, he apologizes and tries to leave after explaining the issues at home. But before he can, Ronald tells Rafa that, in most cases, such actions are carried out by the closest people. Hearing this, Rafa is taken aback. Meanwhile, Eddie comes to meet Farah. He claims that Rafa has sent him to take care of her. When Farah arrives with Ranga, Eddie suddenly says, "Maybe today, I was supposed to be in Rafa's place. If I were your husband, I would never have left you in such a difficult situation." Hearing this, Farah is startled, and a shocking truth is revealed. Once, Farah and Eddie were in a very close relationship. During that time, Farah even had a child, but unfortunately, the baby didn't survive. Afterward, due to numerous arguments, their relationship fell apart, and eventually, both moved on with their lives. That day, Farah had wanted to share this past with Rafa, but she never got the chance. However, who could have known that Eddie still hadn't forgotten those memories? While for Farah, it was just the past, for Eddie, it remained an unforgettable wound. Everything was going fine, but after the baby was lost, everything fell apart. And now, Eddie has returned to take revenge. Along with this revelation, an even deeper mystery unfolds. Their family, especially Ranga, had been cursed with black magic, and the one responsible was none other than Eddie himself. From the beginning, after learning about Ranga's birth, Eddie secretly collected Rafa's hair from a salon and also dug up Ranga's placenta without anyone knowing. This was the starting point of his entire plan. In such cases, a demonic entity or a spirit is manipulated through black magic to torment and slowly lead the victim toward death. When Eddie attempts to kill Ranga, Rafa attacks him from behind. However, Eddie overpowers Rafa, knocking him unconscious. Meanwhile, supernatural occurrences begin in the house, and the demonic entity seizes Ranga. By then, Eddie has his hands around Rafa's throat, choking him. Rafa's breath starts fading, and in those moments, memories of his beautiful times with Farah flash before his eyes. They had so many dreams together, all of which now seem to be left unfulfilled. His gaze falls upon a gift, a watch, that lies on the floor, right next to a family picture. They had promised to always stand by each other. Summoning the last of his strength, Rafa musters his courage and forcefully pushes Eddie away. Meanwhile, with a mother's love and divine blessings, the demonic entity fails to take Ranga. As a result, the entity turns on Eddie and mercilessly kills him, breaking every bone in his body. It is said that if there is even the slightest mistake in black magic, the summoned entity or spirit ends up preying on the one who called it. In the end, their family is reunited, and Rafa vows to return to the path of faith. With this, the movie concludes. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on more videos like this. Thanks for watching.